It's happening. Y'all, it's real. It Metal Gear Solid 3 is being remade. And it's called Metal Gear Solid Delta? What is going on? Well, stay tuned and I'll talk about it. Maybe we can figure out a little bit of what is going on. So, Metal Gear Solid Delta. What is Delta? Why Delta? So, Delta, first of all, its roots are it's the fourth letter of the Greek alphabet. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta. And delta is kind of used most primarily, I think, of uh, a river delta, essentially. Now, what's a river delta? Well, and why is that important at all? Well, I'll get to it, but deltas are generally kind of triangle shaped. They're an area sort of downriver, usually close to where a river meets its wherever it's dumping out into, whether it be a lake or an ocean. Um, Usually it's an ocean, though. The big famous deltas in the world are probably the Mississippi River Delta and the Nile Delta. Now, I am not Egyptian, if you couldn't tell, but I am Arkansan. And Arkansas has got the Mississippi River right there on our border, and we've kind of got an area that's considered the Arkansas Delta. But there's also the Mississippi Delta, which is on the Mississippi side of the river, and that's really considered the main delta region. When people are talking about the Mississippi Delta, that's kind of what they mean. They don't mean the Arkansas Delta, but you can kind of think of the whole general area on both sides of the river as the delta as well. Now, some people might think of the Mississippi River Delta as also including New Orleans and Louisiana, maybe parts of like northern Louisiana, but it really kind of formally doesn't include most of Louisiana, mostly because we consider that part the mouth of the Mississippi. And the mouth kind of has a little bit of a different environment than the delta. The delta's, well, we'll get to what the delta's all about. Excuse me. So the delta scene. Oh, and so scene, yeah. Metal Gear Solid 3's theme. Every Metal Gear Solid game has a big theme. It's gene, meme, and then the third one is scene. So delta as a scene, I think, probably primarily refers to river deltas and literal geographical deltas. That's what I'm thinking of when I think of deltas in a scene. So the delta scene in the Mississippi really kind of runs up at the northern part to Tunica, down to the southern part near Yazoo City. Now, Tunica, I've been there before. Dad took me there when I turned 21. I was able to gamble. And, it's Tunica. But the river delta actually is kind of an interesting region. It's actually, I think it's a great region. It's a very fertile region. There's a lot of sort of like offshoots of the Mississippi going through here, and so you get a lot of, loam soil is what it's called sometimes. It's just the soil's got a lot of good stuff in it for farming. And so historically, this whole region's been the home of a lot of cotton farms. And if you know anything about the history of farming cotton in Mississippi in the United States, that means slavery. So after the war, after the Civil War ended, there was, of course, slavery was abolished, and then a lot of black men who were freed around that area, essentially they were given a chance to start a farm, start their own life in this area. And so a lot of these guys started their own farms, and it's to this day a mostly kind of predominantly black population in the area, both on the Mississippi and the Arkansas side of the river. But they're also typically kind of poor people. They've been kind of politically exiled over time, and they kind of don't have a lot of they don't have a lot going for them, unfortunately, other than just having the land that they have. A lot of these a lot of these types of folks that live in the delta, some you hear stories in Arkansas here about when the flooding happened a few years back, how a bunch of them refused to move. Because to these people, the land that they live on is kind of all they have. It's real important to them. And so, why is any of this important to Metal Gear Solid at all? What does this have to do? Well, I think if you think of Seleno-Yarsk, we think of it's got the big river. So I think that this is probably a river delta area, because you know where in the world is Seleno-Yarsk, y'all? I, I'm not sure anybody's ever figured it out. Um, Maybe the delta thing could be, in one way, a hint as to where in the world you could think of Seleno-Yarsk as being. And I've got some ideas about that myself, and I've seen some really good theory videos about that too. But we're not going to go into that too much here. But that the whole fact that there's a river that plays majorly into the narrative of Metal Gear Solid 3 tells me that the river delta thing must be somehow relevant to what's going on. And the fact that Volgan's group of, let's call them, rebels, are kind of politically exiled in the Soviet Union, and they're kind of doing what they are doing essentially because of politics, right? And because of the times. The other thing I want to mention about the Delta scene is it's the birthplace of the blues. If you know anything about the blues, the music really came from the Delta, from the poor, awful conditions that these black farmers and just black men had to live on, whatever. Excuse me. So, that's the Delta scene. Now, because a delta is also it's not exactly the mouth of the river, but it's kind of, usually thought of as the area where a river starts to widen and gets nearer to its mouth. You could think of the whole delta region as kind of a bridge. It's like, since it's fertile land and it's leading out to the ocean, it kind of serves as like sort of it was a bridge for civilization, you could say. Going from hunter-gatherer societies to farming societies probably happened in a river delta. We don't know that, but it's probably, most likely. And it's kind of a bridge between the river itself and then the ocean. You could think of it that way. Excuse me. So those are the major kind of things that I think of when it comes to Delta first, and how it could maybe relate to Metal Gear Solid 3. The other major thing I want to mention is when you see Delta in written notations. When you see Delta in like written notations, and it's just sitting there next to like a variable, something like that. You see like a delta x or delta x over y. Usually that delta is signifying the word change. Usually delta x means change in x, the variable x. So like delta x over y would be like the change in x over y time. And you see that a lot in chemistry and a lot of sciences and some maths. But delta is especially capital delta, is pretty commonly used to just denote different types of change in different types of sort of in written text. So if the delta symbol means change, and it's literally over the Metal Gear Solid the 3 title, so 3 is now delta. Well, y'all, the Patriots are still here. They're still adding their context. They're back. They're changing stuff. And yeah, so I think that what that means is that we're not going to see 100% the same game. We're going to see some stuff change, and I don't know what all it's going to be, but I bet it relates to some of the stuff I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. So then the last thing to talk about with the delta, really, and just the symbol itself, is it's really a triangle, right? It's 3-sided. And it's kind of a weird shape. It may be in the shape that we see in the title because of the font that they used, which is the font they've used, before in the past, and they're locked into it. You could say so. Maybe they just had to use that triangle. But maybe they couldn't. Hear me out. They've got art people. Maybe they could have designed their own triangle if they didn't like that one. And maybe they used that one specifically because there's something about the shape of that triangle that they liked. I wonder what that could be. I have lots of ideas. I mean, okay, it's an upside down V with the line across it, right? And the line across it's like a bridge. Yeah, okay. Let's move on. That's boring. It's got 3 sides to it, though. The 3-sided thing, I think, is really worth talking about. So, the 3 sides relates to, I think, how I've been talking about this whole struggle in these past lectures. There's kind of this secret civil war, it's not so secret, inside of Cypher between the Big Boss faction and the Zero faction. And I think all of this is able to happen in the way it does in these games because there's a hidden third side that's been sort of there the whole time but doesn't necessarily always make its presence known. But I think we see them in Metal Gear Solid 4. I think it's Big Mama's faction. I think in Metal Gear Solid 4 there's essentially Philanthropy, which is really the Zero side at that point. And then there's Ocelot's side, which is kind of the rest of Cypher. And then there's Eva's people, Big Mama's. And you know how they're all in these black sedans and they're wearing black, but they're highly well outfitted and they look pretty well trained. I think this implies that this is a group within Cypher that just kind of does whatever they need to do to get Cypher stuff done. And so maybe they're mercenaries, maybe they're revolutionaries, maybe they're just black market thugs. They kind of, I think, just do whatever they need to do to get the mission done. And that should kind of sound familiar to people who have listened to the ending speech of Peace Walker. And I mean the real ending speech. So that's what I think's going on with this hidden third faction, is maybe this black hidden third faction has something to do with Fox, possibly. And I was kind of already thinking that myself, but it was going to be a subject of a later lecture, and here we go. So I guess I'm getting into it a little early, but maybe this hidden third side is like a black ops element that exists within Cypher and is just really doesn't pick a side ever, but it works just to kind of further the goals in whatever non-political way they need to have it done. They're kind of like the grease men, maybe. You could think of it that way. Okay, that's enough about the Delta. Let's move on. Why are they showing us like a minute and a half of animals, y'all? What's the deal with that? Why is there an ant, a frog, a parrot, a python, and a croc? What's going on? Why? What is that little deal they just did? Were they just doing that to troll us and waste our time? No. Were they doing that just to distract you and get you thinking that maybe this isn't Metal Gear Solid? Yeah, they were definitely doing it for that reason. But they weren't really totally trying to troll us. They were trying to show us something without letting us know that they're showing us something. That first thing we see in the trailer is an ant's leg that comes down from out of frame. And given the closeness of the shot to the ground and the size of the leg in the frame, it's huge, actually. It's a big leg. It's a big ant. It takes up the whole frame. If you've gone and played Metal Gear Solid Rising Revengeance, you might recall one of the final bosses of the game is this Metal Gear Excelsis. And it's got kind of a black body with a number of legs and red leg tips and other red parts. And this ant is an army ant that has red leg tips and some other red parts, but is mostly black-bodied. So I think that this little ant that we see at the beginning of the trailer literally is a stand-in for Metal Gear Excelsis. I think the way its legs and the pincers and the color all match up. If you look at Metal Gear Excelsis' head, y'all, it looks kind of like an ant's head with a couple of pincers on it. It's just stylized to be a mech, So why are they showing us Excelsis there? Well, I'll get to it. What's the next animal we see? Well, they go up and they show us there's this dead frog on its back. It's not just any frog. It's a red and kind of blue-legged, red-bodied and kind of blue-legged poison dart frog. Now, to note, poison dart frogs are native to South America. They're mostly found in really the jungles of the Amazon, but you also, I think, find some in Central America. But given where we think Selenoyarsk is in Russia, it doesn't make any sense at all that a poison dart frog's there. This poison dart frog is the Shagohod, though. It's essentially standing in for the Shagohod. It's got the kind of the same color in terms of the body, and it's got kind of the shape. The Shagohod kind of looks like a frog to me, actually. And the fact that it's a poison dart specifically, this is a big idea, and I haven't gone into this before, but just to kind of give you an idea as to what I'm thinking, I think the idea of the Metal Gears themselves, the big mechs, is kind of itself a poison dart. It's kind of a distraction or a red herring that's thrown at us and literally at the world within the world of Metal Gear. Like, these people keep thinking, oh, if we just get another Metal Gear, a better Metal Gear, it'll be the best thing ever. And it's like the Metal Gears themselves are really just kind of ultimately distractions in the end of all of the plots of all these games. They're never like the ultimate final deal, right? There's always like a fight on top of it or a fight after it. After the Shagohod is when you have your final fight. After you deal with Rex is when you have your final fight. So it's like, to me, the Shagohod itself is kind of a poison dart in that it's like maybe they invented it back then as a way of sort of having this sort of little poison dart that they could use on their enemies. And so by other political, leaders and forces trying to go after Metal Gear themselves, it's like they kind of poison themselves. Maybe you like that idea, maybe you don't. I've kind of just come up with it, but let me know what y'all think about that one. So then after we see the frog, we see a parrot come and pick up the frog, and it carries this frog off. And I'll get back to what the parrot is, but if you should recognize the parrot, that's the Ends parrot. That's the same color. It's the Ends parrot. Then after the parrot lands on a log out in the lake, swamp, this gigantic snake, which at first I thought was a Tsuchinoko, and then I realized, oh, that's like just a giant like python maybe? It looked like a python. Comes up, grabs the parrot's leg just barely. Parrot tries to fly off, and then a croc comes in from nowhere and just bodies this python and then starts rolling on it, and the croc and the python start fighting. The python is Metal Gear Ray, and the croc is Metal Gear Rex. And their fight is the Metal Gear Solid 4 fight from Ray and Rex. Sorry. Ray, being the python, think of how the python kind of, it moves through water a little bit quicker, and how Ray's kind of shown moving through water. And I think the head style of Ray is kind of more reptilian a little bit, and the head style of Rex is a little more dinosaur, a little more like a croc. It's also kind of got the longer snout, and it's a little bit, like a little bit longer, right? The whole head's a little bit bigger, is what I should say. And the way Ray's kind of mouth sides open kind of recalls the way some reptiles can open their mouths in like some crazy ways. So then if the python is Ray, and the croc is Rex, and the ant is Excelsis, and the frog is Shagohod, well, what's left? It's Sahelanthropus, really. Out of the main games, there's not really another one. I mean, you could go to Metal Gear Russia, but that's not Portable Ops, and it being 1970 or 71. It's like there's nothing really. Russia kind of has some wings, but I really think it's Sahelanthropus, because Sahelanthropus has the wing tanks, the white wing tanks that I talked about in the past video. And, Sahelanthropus is shown kind of aerial, and in a lot of aerial contexts in that game, jumping up and then falling down, and then falling down, and then jumping a lot. But so this parrot, there's things with this going on with this parrot, y'all. The first frame you see the parrot is not in the camera's eye, it's in the dead frog's eye. You see a reflection of the parrot first. That is a callback to the first time we see Skullface, y'all. In Metal Gear Solid Ground Zero is the first time we see Skullface is in a reflection. First, we see him in a reflection. Well, we also see behind. We see his back, right? But the first time we see his face is in a reflection of another soldier's visor. So the parrot is Skullface, y'all. This you see what I'm saying? This parrot is shown carrying our metaphorical Shagohod, the frog, right? Well, if you look in the background, and we all know what's carrying the Shagohod is a bunch of helicopters. Well, how is Fox equivalent to the helicopters? Because, like I've been saying, Sahelanthropus really is Fox, is Skullface. Well, in Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, go back to the game after the Virtuous Mission stuff has kind of ended in the scenes after Snake's thrown over the bridge is happening. When Vulcan shoots the Davy Crockett, okay? The Davy Crockett is flying through the air. They cut away from the Davy Crockett and they go back to Snake, who's next to the river getting himself all medicaled up. And then they show in this weird kind of out of, like, it's seemingly unmotivated shot of the skyline looking up through the trees, and you see right as the bomb's going off, there's this parachute coming through the frickin' sky, just dropping out of nowhere with some kind of a container attached to it. And like, y'all, what the hell is that? Like, why did they put that there? What's going on here? Is that just a mistake? Why would they do that? That's Fox, y'all. That is Skullface. He was there at Selino Yarsk, like he said. What I think happened was Fox was undercover in Volgan's unit, and he was in those choppers. And I had this idea before, and I've just never said it, but he's in those choppers, and he knows when the Davy Crockett's about to be shot, everybody's going to be paying attention to that. Because this big old missile's about to go flying, everybody's going to look. So right when that happens, he jumps out the back of one of probably the back choppers, and he does it in the form of, he's inside this container that's got a parachute. So he probably like puts himself in some kind of a box or something and hooks himself out of the plane somehow. And then he parachutes down, and while the box is in midair, the bomb goes off. Now, who have I been talking about being in midair this whole time when the bomb goes off? Is Chico. So Fox probably infiltrated the jungles of Selino Yarsk right after the Virtuous Mission ended, and he was probably there the whole time setting up the grounds for the Snake Eater operation while Snake was off doing whatever else he does until he gets back to the jungle. And I bet the whole time he had the face of Snake while he was out there. Because what's his cover? Well, his cover is probably that he's a snake, and he's going to go out here and do a bunch of stuff with Snake's face on, so that like he can get away with it, essentially, right? I think he's kind of working undercover for Cypher, really for Zero, to, like I said, sort of set the ground for everything, but also maybe to kind of do a little bit of his own stuff too. I'll get into it later, but I think Rykov might be Fox undercover. I think that, where does Rykov come from and where does he go? Well, I think that he's probably Fox's undercover identity. It gets into the uniform thing. Essentially, the way Raiden gets the uniform in Metal Gear Solid 2 to go meet Ames is a inverse of how Naked Snake meets Rykov to get his uniform, essentially. Howdy, folks. Future Ross here. Something I forgot and I wanted to mention. I didn't go into why I think the ant, which stands for Excelsis, shows up first. I think it has to do with the time loop thing. Excelsis being the last Metal Gear, and then Shagohod being the next one, kind of implies that 3 Delta here really is coming after kind of a Metal Gear Rising Revengeance type event that might follow Metal Gear Solid 4. Might be a little bit different. I imagine Metal Gear Solid Revengeance would be a little bit different than Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, right? But with that said, I think the reason we're shown the animals we're shown is because these are the games that are going to be in the collection. It's going to have Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3, as they've already shown us. And it's going to have Peace Walker. And it's going to have Rising. Rising Revengeance, that is. I think it's going to be a 5-in-1 collection, and I think the 5 thing may show up in Volume 1 and in Volume 2. But if I'm right about that, we'll have to do more videos on that, so we'll see. So, if you look at the face of Snake here, that we're shown in the very ending of the Konami trailer that shows the nice background with the Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, and it's got his face there. One side of his face is all covered in mud, but the way it's kind of lit and the way it looks to me kind of evokes a burn mark look, like a burn scar or somebody who's just been scorched. And if you also look, he's got a couple of other little unique features. He's got a cut underneath his left eye, and he's also got a cut down here on his lip. You can actually compare these 3 details 1-to-1 to a shot of Ishmael in the Phantom Pain. Now, when you shoot Skullface, after you're done giving him the shots or not that you want to give him, when the game takes back over and it goes back to the cutscene, it shows Miller grabbing Snake's arm and the firing of the gun some more. There's this quick little thing where the game does a flashback with Miller, and it superimposes his past self, essentially the old Miller that we knew from Peace Walker, with his yellow scarf and his old hair and everything. We get to see him shooting Skullface, but, well, we don't know it's Skullface, but we get to see him doing the same thing, except his mouth is like, it's open and he's really angry looking, and he's covered in blood on his face. And then the camera pans over to Ishmael, pans over to Snake, who I think it's the same Snake from Ground Zeroes. It's Ishmael. He's got the same sneaking suit on and everything. And he's got a cut underneath his left eye. And he's got blood down here under his lip. Excuse me. And the entire right side of his face is covered in blood, which is a 1-to-1, I think, parallel between the way that they present Snake to us here at the end of the Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater trailer. So why are they drawing parallels between Snake and Ishmael? Like I said, I think it's because Fox was literally in the jungle, probably infiltrating stuff beforehand with the face of Snake. But he had to, not tell anybody. Now, if you go take a good close look at this picture of Snake, the bright one again, and you look at his eyes, just decide for yourself. Go look at his eye color. I'm not even going to tell you what I think. Go look at his eye color and ask yourself, is that the naked Snake that you remember? So the last thing I want to mention is that at the end of the trailer, when we pan up to the tree canopy with the triangle-shaped light coming through it, the green triangle superimposed comes up, and then the green triangle turns blue and shatters. And the blue things are very, 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 very small, and I can't tell what they are. I've got a 4K TV. I don't have a good PC right now. If anybody could get like a really good high-res version of that and tell what they are, I'd love to see it. But I saw them and instantly thought of the butterflies from Metal Gear Solid, Peace Walker, and from the Phantom Pain 2. And you know what I think about the blue butterfly. So it changes, though, from that blue butterfly almost immediately to a bunch of glass shards that start flying at the camera. And those glass shards kind of have a blue glinty reflection, so maybe that's what it actually shattered into. I can't tell, but before all the glass shards hit the camera or sort of sweep past the camera, they turn into these kind of purple petals that kind of recall the petals from the end of Snake Eater, really. The Stars of Bethlehem and their petals, but they're purple. Now, y'all, have we ever seen purple Stars of Bethlehem in Metal Gear anywhere? We've seen red ones And we've seen white ones, and we've seen burned ones, but have we seen purple ones yet? And now remember, it started as blue, the color of that triangle, and then it shatters, and then it kind of turns transparent, and then to this purple petal. Now, blue to purple, in terms of science, kind of represents a heightening of the energy level, right? So that, like, blue is nearly the highest wavelength light that we can see, and purple is kind of the highest wavelength light that we can see. So it's the highest energy light. So I think that could relate to maybe why it changes to purple. Also, obviously, purple is a mixture of red and blue in terms of the pigment. So maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe the red, that we got from the last petals is going to be somehow made more blue or combined with the blue. Maybe there'll be like something different going on with your choices that you're given in the game. Something's going to change, maybe, related to the colors, possibly. I don't know. It's a really cool little detail, and you could probably come up with your own meaning there. I think that's all I've got to talk about for now. Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, y'all. What? It's happening. It looks like the news is saying, the rumor mill is saying that it's going to come out around 2024. I expected that they probably wanted to try to push to release this in 2023. Given the quality of the screenshots that I'm seeing go around from Konami's own website, it looks good. And y'all, I know this is Konami. I know to put on my waders and my rubber gloves and my gas mask, okay? But given everything I've just talked about here, are y'all really that worried about the future of Metal Gear without Hideo Kojima? Or do you think that maybe Kojima's built a solid enough foundation up to this point that the skilled and knowledgeable staff that are still at Konami that worked on these past games, they might still have a few things to show us about these games that we haven't figured out yet, I mean, it took us how many years to figure out the Phantom Pain? Maybe there's some stuff in all these other games we haven't figured out yet, too. I don't know. I don't ever like to feel like that I've ever got a piece of art totally figured out, That's kind of silly to me. I always like to revisit art and see if I can find something new. So, with all that said, here's to the future of Metal Gear and Metal Gear Solid, and I hope Delta is gonna deliver us something a little bit better than maybe what we've been thinking we would be getting, because it's been kind of hard out here with all these rumors, and the game was just kind of going away, and kind of all the way the story ended and all of this stuff. It's been kind of a dark time, but I think I see a light on the horizon, y'all. So Delta.